I'd really love to see digital contracts, where you can follow coffee from all the way, financially.
On the
And
blockchain. Yeah.
yeah, well, like, to me, okay, this is picked, on these particular days or whatever. And you can look at it traveling through. I think it should be charged for. I think that aspect, should be charged for, that you see, what's been taken out the mill, like, understanding the whole process of it, which would, I think, educate people a little more about what, farmers have to go through, how much they lose from, their pickings, and, where that goes to. And, all those sort of little aspects that really makes, coffee exceptional. If you can follow that through, I think roasters would understand a little more about the whole process, of what goes, what happens to get coffee to them. But also, I think it's a great way to really tell a story of a particular, lot as well.
Mm.
And I think from a payment point of view, like, yeah, having those sort of things, I think, would also be beneficial from a producer point of view.
If you're looking for a free way to support the work we do, bringing you conversations with our amazing guests on the Daily Coffee Pro podcast by Map It Forward, please subscribe, follow, and rate us wherever you listen to the podcast. It really helps us out. It's also a huge help if you share this episode and our social media content with your coffee friends. For links, check the show notes. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is unfortunately the final episode of a really great conversation with Mark Dundon from Seven Seeds in Melbourne, Australia. Mark and Bridget, the founders of Seven Seeds, have opened Suburbia this year. It's a bakery that's under the Seven Seeds family. And we're exploring in this series the difference between opening a cafe pre and post-COVID. The landscape is completely different. And then you tack on to that the coffee crisis that's happening in 2025, and that's changing things yet again. Now, in this final episode, we're talking about what role will technology play in specialty coffee across the supply chain over the next 5 to 10 years. And when we talk about technology, it's not just electronics and AI, also varietals and the genetic aspect of that is a form of technology in coffee. So in this episode, we're going to talk about kind of all of that. Mark, when you think about technology, what are you most excited about over the next 5 or 10 years, the role that technology could play in driving our industry?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of really positive aspects to technology coming in, like even for a producer level, I think, water activity, even those basic tests,
Right.
on site, I think are really going to change it. I'd really love to see digital contracts, where you can follow coffee from all the way, financially.
On the
And
blockchain. Yeah.
yeah, well, like, to me, okay, this is picked, on these particular days or whatever. And you can look at it traveling through. I think it should be charged for. I think that aspect, should be charged for, that you see, what's been taken out the mill, like, understanding the whole process of it, which would, I think, educate people a little more about what, farmers have to go through, how much they lose from, their pickings, and, where that goes to. And, all those sort of little aspects that really makes, coffee exceptional. If you can follow that through, I think roasters would understand a little more about the whole process, of what goes, what happens to get coffee to them. But also, I think it's a great way to really tell a story of a particular, lot as well.
Mm.
And I think from a payment point of view, like, yeah, having those sort of things, I think, would also be beneficial from a producer point of view. Yeah,
Will
I think obviously,
crypto, do you think, be a part of that in the future?
I think, tied to the US dollar is always a pain for a lot of people, and I think
Mm.
obviously that may change. I still want to get into the US, so I don't really want to be able to, slam too many things. But like the reality is that I think that sort of ability would be beneficial to some countries, like, Australia, and, perhaps producing countries. Like, I would love to just be
Yeah.
able to pay, coffee, yeah,
In Aussie dollar.
directly. Yeah. Well, no,
Or
yeah, Aussie
or
dollar
even
or
in a
whatever.
digital
Yeah.
currency.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. For me, I think it would be really cool, to like how all of, coffee contracts, like when you it's archaic almost. But and
Right.
there's a and I think realistically, there's probably a reason for that, but I think change for small producers and things like that, it would be great to do a trial project on that.
Mm.
But looking at problems in coffee world, like I think Brazil with mechanical harvesting, I think to really be able to look at some sort of automation process in Central America and those sort of aspects would be really really good as well. I think
Mm.
looking at some of the aspects of farming with drones, not but yeah, like even using a drone, at our farm to see where, people were stealing the fertilizer and stuff like that was, an interesting aspect. You could, you know, go out and check very quickly the perimeter of, the farm to really look at, what was going on.
Yeah, wow. Where's your farm?
Well, and I have a farm in Honduras. He has a,
Oh,
bigger,
that's right.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I, you and I have been in coffee long enough where we remember the days before the digital grinder, where we
yeah,
had to click, 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 click to dose coffee, and we weren't weighing coffee, and we were kind of like intuitive baristas. We
yeah,
were smelling the pour, and we were like looking at it to see if it's blonding and all of that kind of stuff. And we have been lucky enough to witness the
change.
kind of the whole change from then to what we're at now. And I'm kind of blown away by how far it's come in 20 years. I'm not sure that all of it was necessary. But then again, that,
Yeah,
a lot of people will say it absolutely was. What do you think?
well, I'm fairly vocal about this machinery fetish that people seem to have. Like, I don't know whether coffee is a lot better. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's some stunning, micro lots coming out of different varietals, and things like that, which I really,
Right.
but like, I think in general, like, you can do a lot of work with, some fairly basic machinery that makes delicious coffee. I see a few problems with, I suppose automation and things like that. Like, I think it's great, from a workload point of view, but we're finding a lot of, more complex technology not having such a lifespan, or having, issues, quite, you know, common, whether it's your grinder that, weighs, having service, you know, 3 or 4
Mm-hmm.
times a year or something like that, which is quite costly. Your automatic milk dispenser, blowing an element, which is 3K, So, a lot of these outlays are fairly important to, someone who's running a cafe, and understanding those sort of service costs and those sort of aspects really aren't fundamentally worked in all that often. So I think realistically, needs to be accommodated in, your day-to-day sort of budgeting. So I think,
Mm-hmm.
it's great to have something that, steams milk and, does it automatically for you. But I think, you really need to look at, hospitality service. I think, you get yourself into a little bit of a bind when you're looking at 5 different alt milks and, this and that, because you tend to really, have so much time on the bar. And you need to charge for that sort of time to produce something, So I think it was a lot easier, back in the early days where there
Oh,
was
yeah.
pretty much, one type of milk, or, yeah, you know, 2 types. We'll give you the skinniest one we've got, which usually was just the normal.
And
Um,
soy. Let's give them
yeah,
3
yeah,
types of milk, right?
that's right. But like, now I think it's a lot more complex in regards to a bar setup, and those sort of aspects. So yeah, yeah.
With the issues of labor happening, like Gen Alpha are not going to want to work in cafes. Gen Z barely want to work in cafes. So is technology going to be the thing that saves people who want to have cafes? Are we going to see more automation, more digitization?
I don't know whether I agree with people not wanting to work in cafes. I think there are some people who do. Um, like I think it's less and less, like I think, whether you want
Mm,
to look at, you know, I think the reality is that automation will help a lot. I think people need to understand the limitations of that, as I sort of expressed earlier, but like just from a point of
mm,
view of really looking at, producing a product that's like, I think people should stand behind their product and really look at not having a huge, you know, array of what they're producing. So like, great espresso, maybe a couple of, filter, like one filter option, maybe reduce those alt milks down to, two or three perhaps, look at, having the ability to, have a couple of signature drinks or whatever. Like, I think you really need to tailor it and really look at what you're doing with, automation and things like that. Um, you're going to need people to, yeah, to greet people. You're going to need people to interact. Most people come into our cafe because they like the people in there. Um, Coffee has
yeah.
to be delicious, but if you've got those two things working right, you will see a huge tick. Like, as roasters, we want to deliver delicious coffee to a cafe and have them, make a fantastic coffee. But that's only part of the journey. The next journey is really, um, offering that, hospitality and service. Like, our little cafe traveler, like the guys in there are just, absolutely fantastic at what they do, making coffee, interacting with the locals, knowing what drinks they like, what they usually have, what their tastes and all these sort of things are, interaction with them. And yeah, just being nice guys. It is great to watch. And when you see someone in hospitality who does it, it's a joy to watch, I think.
I don't miss Australian cafes hearing you talk about that way. Like it's just, there's nothing, it's one thing. It's like the privilege of my life having been a barista because I get to have that experience with customers and I drank up every second of it. But it's also another thing to go into an Australian cafe and see the joy on a barista's face. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't happen like that anywhere else around the world than the way it happens in Australia. It really is something
Yeah.
really beautiful in Australia.
Yeah, I think it's not a bad place to work. I think everyone should do 2 years in hospitality.
100%.
Yeah.
100%, especially people who are in politics.
Everyone. That's not, yeah, that's, yeah. But yeah, everyone needs to learn to be, I think humility is a really
Decent
great thing to,
humans.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's a really important aspect.
um, I wanted to ask you about, with regards to technology, the role that you think that like e-commerce and delivery apps, they really seem to be taking over. They've definitely taken over here.
Yeah.
While people really do like dining out and going to cafes, and it is a part of the social scene here. Right now, we're in the middle of summer, and the temperature is about 45 degrees average
Yeah.
Celsius every day, up to 52 degrees. So people are using delivery apps a lot. Is that, do you think, going to get more prevalent in our industry?
Well, for us, we probably are seeing maybe a little difference. Like I think we're seeing a little bit of a stable platform with that. It's actually become a lot more expensive in Australia, delivery. Like a lot of prices have gone
Mm,
up. So for us, it's
yeah,
problematic in regards to the whole equation. And we really need to charge, like, a lot of these costs are absorbed into, per kilo price of coffee, which I think can't
right.
happen as much going
There's
forward.
nothing left.
But
Yeah.
with the volatility and stuff like that, you just don't know where it's going to go. So, like to a certain
Mm,
extent, it's sort of difficult to do that anyway. Um, like I can see the reason why it happens, where you are. Like for us, I think people who have got used to that, like I'm constantly disappointed getting stuff online. I still
yeah.
think that, things are starting to really turn around a little bit. Like I want
Oh,
people to
really?
come in. Yeah, yeah, I think it's, yeah, I want people to come in and buy a bag, spend 5 minutes or whatever, or, come in and we'll talk to you. That's for sure. So, those sort of things, like we may get, such a small percentage of the population, and maybe the e-commerce guys are doing it. But like the reality is that, if you're buying from a third party, from a roaster, and it's being delivered, you've got to pay for all of that.
Yeah.
Um, and, yeah, you really need to taste, what you're buying and make sure that it's, exactly what you want to a certain extent.
Remember the good old days of like when you'd go into a cafe in Australia and you'd buy a bag of coffee and, it came with a free coffee so that you could, a free
Yeah.
cup of coffee so you could taste it in store, exactly what you were buying made by a barista. That
Yeah.
seems like it was such a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think that sort of stuff, like with automation, I think there should be, an aspect of person to person. I think automation
Yeah.
should free up people to do that. I think,
Mm.
to have a machine, like I know, the whole automated machines are a bit of a, you know, hit in some locations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think after a while, talking to a person, having a bit of a laugh or a bit of a, whatever, I think that's really important to people,
Yeah.
especially in this digital age.
Especially. And with the kind of the direction that kind of what's going on in the world is going, having that
Yeah,
kind of connection. The cafe is the place that people should be able to have that connection that they don't get anywhere else.
correct. Yeah.
So, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say something probably I shouldn't, but like the whole white noise of people on phones and things like that, it's got to a level where I really
Yeah.
think, like I honestly think in 10 years there'll be stuff banned that we're doing now because they've worked out that it's destroying people's minds. But like just experience, like enjoy, like yeah, like I think enjoy life a little bit in regards. Like, I
Yeah.
had a health scare quite a few years, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and it just made me just appreciate everything to really soak up
Mm.
and just, do, so the reality is that it's important to get off that and really, yeah, enjoy that cup of coffee, walk down to the supermarket and, pat the dog on the way and, enjoy just buying
Yeah.
that one envelope and heading back home. Those sort of aspects I think are really important to do rather than, ordering everything online and getting it delivered. And, like if you're on your phone while you're doing that, I think you're wasting your time. Walk down and grab
Mm.
whatever you're buying or try like, yeah.
Connecting with people. I love it.
Yeah.
As we
Yeah.
wrap up this series, we have a new question that we're asking every guest. So
Okay.
I should have prepared you. I apologize in advance, but you don't have to answer the question. But the question is, when the future version of you comes back and watches this, what do you hope for him?
I hope he's proud and has directed, where we're going with our business in the right sort of, place. But also, hopefully this advice is valid. Hopefully it, sums up, the time of 2025 and what we're in. It is just my experience in my little, microcosm of a place on the planet and, it was my experiences. So, yeah, I hope it's of value. Like, the reality is it's honest, it is what I feel and, what I hope, happens. But hopefully looking back, yeah, I'd be proud of it.
I'm pretty sure he will be, and hello to him. And I hope him and the future version of me are somewhere fabulous having a coffee, hopefully with Lisa as well.
Sounds perfect. I'm sure Lisa will be there for sure. She'd be keen to travel.
100%.
Yeah.
Where can people find out about Seven Seeds and Suburbia and all the projects that you've got going on?
Look, I think just by website or, coming and visiting. Obviously, I'd encourage a visit, rather than online at the moment. But after that last year, but like, I think you can just, do a Google on us and check it out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, we'll have links in the show notes, folks. And if you are in Melbourne, you don't want to miss the experience of going to a Seven Seeds Cafe. Honestly, it will benchmark everything for you. Mark, thank you for everything that you've done for our industry. Thank you for the way that you've inspired my career and helped formulate me as a business person. It really has often saved my mental health, and I'm really grateful for it.
You're too kind.
This is the humility of Mark Dundon, ladies and gentlemen. He never wants to accept a compliment. I've never known him to be somebody that accepts a compliment. But would you do us the privilege of signing off our series for us with peace, love, and peanut butter?
Peace, love, and peanut butter. Thanks, guys.
Have an amazing rest of your day, everyone. Bye. This episode is part of a 5-part series produced by Mapper Forward. Check the full playlist and guest details in the show notes, as well as how you can support our work in the coffee industry. Become a premium YouTube subscriber, explore our Patreon and any brands we've partnered with to bring you this podcast. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really does help us grow our audience.